My education background is I have a PhD in disability studies and sexuality, and spent a significant amount of time doing research at the Autism Institute in Orange, California. I learned a lot during this time about neurodiversity, sexuality, gender, identification, education, and I've found that neurodivergence, gender dysphoria, and identity formation have a close link. Before diving into autism, gender, and sex-related issues, it's essential to establish two foundational points. The first point is that neurotypes are scientifically coded. Neurotypes such as autism, ADHD, and bipolar disorder are not subjective labels. They are measurable and scientifically coded. My background in disability studies and my certifications in facial coding through the Paul Ekman system have allowed me to explore this deeply. Facial coding, often referred to as the universal language of human emotion, involves analyzing expressions to decode emotions, detect deception, and understand critical elements of human interaction, including but not limited to identifying neurological conditions, also associated with different health conditions. Beyond emotions, faces can also reveal neurotypes. For example, just as Down syndrome can be recognized through specific facial markers, other neurotypes to the untrained eye that might not be as visible, like autism, ADHD, bipolar disorder, and even personality disorders, can also be identified through physical and behavioral traits. While the DSM, or the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, is a good start, there is much more that goes into correct identification of an intellectual or mental health variance. What's remarkable is that this isn't subjective. It's not debatable. It's science. Research has validated systems for coding neurological differences, and AI is now advancing these efforts. Neuroprocessing isn't just written in behavior or diagnosis. It's encoded in our biology, our faces, our bone structure, and the way our brains are wired. It's not caused by something in the water. It was determined before we were born. Each neurotype is uniquely gendered, and so are the associated codings for those genders. For example, a woman with bipolar disorder exhibits different facial and behavioral coding compared to a man with the same condition. This extends to all neurotypes, revealing patterns that are not just linked to anatomy or social constructs, but are deeply rooted in biology. This leads to an important realization. While society debates gender as a subjective construct, the truth is that gender is encoded in our biology, blood, and brain wiring. Gender isn't just about physical features. It's part of the foundational code of who we are. The second point that's important to establish before I jump into this topic is that society is misplaced focused on gender transitions. Our society has become fixated on gender transitions as a solution to identity struggles, focusing almost exclusively on changing anatomical features and hormone levels. However, anatomy is only one part of the picture. For instance, a woman with a flat chest may feel less feminine due to societal norms, but does not necessarily identify as transgender. Instead, she might pursue breast augmentation because of these social pressures. This social fixation is heavily influenced by media and pornography, which have shaped perceptions of what male and female anatomy should look like. Pornography has dictated trends in breast size, penis size, and even vulva shape, much like foot binding once dictated perceptions of feminine manifestation in ancient Chinese cultures. These are socially constructed norms, not biological truths, and they focus on a vanity that doesn't accurately portray the true meaning of gender. By materializing gender as something tied to appearance, clothing, or makeup, we fundamentally misunderstood its essence. Gender is about fulfilling one's potential for connection, vulnerability, and parenthood. Yet, in our eagerness to alleviate pain or discomfort, we've equated gender with external markers rather than helping individuals understand and accept their biological and neurological identities. There's also a strong link between gender confusion and autism, but more specifically, identity confusion and autism. Identity confusion is a hallmark of autism. Even outside gender, autistic individuals often struggle to define their sense of self. This confusion can manifest in basic areas, like choosing a fashion style, identifying a career path, forming friendships, and understanding roles within relationships. At the heart of this struggle is a difference in schema formation, which is how we create meaning, build identity, and establish belonging. For autistic individuals, schema development is rigid and linear, making it harder to integrate complex, fluid concepts like identity. They are often deeply empathetic and intelligent, but their neurological wiring processing is different when it comes to identity formation, leading to feelings of disconnection and isolation. Feeling lonely is so closely tied to autism that it can be seen in almost every area of autism. Society often misinterprets this isolation as a lack of interest in connection, but the reality is that autistic individuals crave relationships. However, sensory sensitivities, bullying, and repeated social rejection often push them into isolation, exacerbating their struggles with identity and belonging. And as they crave that identity and belonging, social media presents opportunities for belonging that are not always congruent with who they really are. There are unique gender and sexuality differences in those with autism. Women with autism frequently report feeling asexual or struggling with sexual arousal. Many share that they have never experienced sexual arousal with a partner, finding that their capacity for intimacy is more emotionally driven. For these women, arousal is linked to feeling deeply understood and appreciated in unique, personal ways. Women and girls with autism also have a significantly higher incidence of being sexually assaulted, oftentimes not even realizing they have been sexually assaulted until someone has explained it to them, if they ever even share that experience with someone. These factors, among other factors, can make it especially difficult for autistic women to connect with societal norms of what it is to be feminine, leading to further confusion about their gender identity, and also impacts their sense of safety around those with different neurological processing systems and different genders, leading to further confusion and isolation. Men with autism have some different challenges. Men with autism experience distinct challenges. Many report feeling unseen or ostracized in dating and social interactions, leading to a reliance on pornography and other sexual variances. Men exposed to pornography in childhood often develop problematic viewing habits, which can persist due to slower social and emotional maturation common in autism. Some autistic men even report exposure to child pornography during childhood. Unlike individuals with dark triad personality traits who lack empathy and remorse, autistic men who struggle with this issue often despise themselves. This self-loathing isolates them further, contributing to suicidality and identity confusion. In desperation, some believe their struggles with sexuality and self-acceptance mean they are in the wrong body. Hormone therapy may suppress arousal, reducing reliance on pornography and leading them to conclude that transitioning was the answer all along. However, this conclusion often reflects a misunderstanding of their underlying struggles rather than addressing the root causes, as they essentially castrate themselves with these hormone replacement therapies and lose the capacity for arousal altogether. Now, there's a lot more that gets complicated with this issue. There's a big issue we're seeing now in younger populations and the role of non-public schools and identity confusion for those with autism. Oftentimes, people with autism that don't integrate into school as well may get sent to a private or non-public school with a lot of other children with disabilities. Concerning trends are emerging in non-public schools designed for autistic children. Many of these schools lack neurodiversity, segregating autistic students from broader populations. Parents, practitioners, and qualitative research reveal a troubling pattern. Autistic children often enter these schools feeling relatively stable in their gender identity, but leave with gender dysphoria. Instead of addressing this phenomenon, schools and parents are often encouraged to affirm the dysphoria, reinforcing confusion rather than providing the education and support these children need. This reflects a systematic failure to integrate neurodiverse perspectives into identity formation practices. Now, there's a really interesting historical parallel here when it comes to race intelligence and autism. This oversight echoes past societal failures. For example, early intelligence studies suggested that Black individuals scored lower on IQ tests, leading to harmful assumptions that race was inherently tied to intelligence. This was commonly accepted for a very long time. It wasn't until researchers investigated the root causes, disparities in education, systematic racism, and lack of opportunity that the truth became clear. The issue wasn't race, it was systematic barriers. Today, we see a similar pattern with autism and gender dysphoria. Rather than addressing systemic issues like loneliness, isolation, and societal pressures, we've embraced the assumption that gender dysphoria is inherently tied to autism. This uncritical acceptance marginalizes autistic individuals, much like systematic failures once marginalized communities of color. We have to see the bigger picture here. We know loneliness has been declared a public health crisis, with autistic individuals among the most profoundly affected. Yet, instead of addressing the deeper causes of their struggles, we validate identity confusion without providing the tools or education needed for resolution. We invest funding in work learning opportunities rather than relational opportunities, especially as it pertains to sexuality and family. Compassion and kindness must be paired with evidence-based support and systematic change. History will judge this moment not by those who raise these concerns, as is being done now, but by those who ignored them. By understanding the unique challenges of autism and providing holistic, compassionate guidance, we can help individuals form authentic and resilient identities. It's important to note that when I'm talking about autism, I'm not talking about those who have no interaction or integration with society. I'm talking about your unidentified autistic mother, father, sibling, spouse, coworker, friend who have been misunderstood and marginalized. I'm not talking about some rare case. I'm saying that this is very prevalent. One of the studies I conducted was specifically related to the gross underidentification of autism, how it's often perceived incorrectly as another health impairment, such as ADHD. It's very difficult for most people to identify autism that is less visible. And this is the population that needs identification and intervention the most profoundly. There's been research, most notably a recent article with over 1,000 participants that was first published in one of the top academic journals for sexuality, the Archives of Sexual Behavior. It was peer-reviewed by top experts in the field. And yet, this article received outcry from an activist wing of sexuality research. And why? Because the conclusions were not what this activist group wanted. And they had no real critique of the methodology, but just the outcomes. Dr. James Cantor has been studying transgender populations his entire career. We're talking decades. He himself is gay and married to a man and has no affiliation with any political groups. And he has been coming out persistently within this same sexuality research academy and been crying out for people to see that this rise in transgender identities has more to do with autism and borderline personality disorders paired with identity confusion rather than an actual identification of transgender issues or acceptance. And that social media is what's playing the most profound role in confusing these individuals that already struggle with identity formation. And while they feel ostracized and left out because they feel weird and different because of the loneliness they experience, that's a hallmark of autism and confusion in many different identity areas, they find in social media a community that says, if you are part of this marginalized group, if you identify as a different gender or any other variants within this spectrum of LGBT issues, we will take you with open arms and you are welcome here. And they start to see this social movement and they start to identify with it. Yeah, I feel this way. I don't always feel my gender. I don't always feel this way. And they get so excited to be accepted into this community. And no one helps them in the process. No one helps them understand their schema formation or identifying their invisible disability. While schools spent an exorbitant amount of time and resources breaking down simple things like self-care and hygiene for people on the autism spectrum, they fail to address the most important issue facing individuals with autism: identity formation, especially in terms of gender. Gender is integral in every way into every aspect of our lives. And individuals with autism are severely marginalized in this respect. We are validating individuals who are struggling with identity formation to death, literally to death, into loneliness and isolation, further confusion, and we are leaving them on their own in this regard. I'm not saying to go to your friend or your loved one who may identify as transgender and tell them, hey, I'm not going to support this anymore. I'm saying love them. I'm saying take them in, embrace them, and give them a place of security. But parents are primarily responsible for helping their children develop. And that includes the area of identity and gender development. And if parents are not actively helping their children to understand their gender and the purpose of their gender and how it relates to relationships and the potential for parenthood, no matter how much we love our children, no matter how hard we are trying, if we are not doing this, we are failing them in the most important area of their life. They need us. They need their parents to set aside social movements and see them, their future, and help them to understand what it means to be them.